Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for coming out this afternoon. This is the last session of the day. I know it's been a long day for everybody. We have been talking about this for a while with the planning committee, and I want to thank the panelists today for being on this panel. We have an esteemed group of folks on the panel that come from both the partnering side of the business as well as acquisition. So lots of experience here with these four guys, and so we'll start with a little bit of an overview of the session. So we'll start off with introductions of the panelists, then we'll have a roundtable discussion, and then we'll end with some Q&A. Just a little bit about me. I'm Michael Campbell. I'm one of the managing partners at Forward Motion EDU. We are a sales, marketing, and distribution company focusing on the international markets. We currently have sales teams based in the Middle East, the Caribbean, and in Southeast Asia. So if anyone has some opportunities that you would like to talk about, revenue expansion in those areas, we'd be happy to talk to you. My colleague Mike Gerdyman is here in the back here. He would also be happy to speak with you about that. We'll let each of the panelists introduce themselves. Let's start with Craig Battle. Craig?
I am the founder of Tucker Capital. Tucker Capital, by the way, has no capital, but it's an investment banking firm that we started in 1982. And we were all Wall Street guys who saw high-level investment banking being provided to small and mid-sized companies, and we thought there was a real opportunity to go after that market. Believe it or not, back then the big firms were only working, big investment banks were only working with big companies. So the firm initially was a classic investment banking boutique, doing acquisition work and sale of companies as well as capital raising. And it was in the early 90s that I think we got lucky. We knew that we had to specialize if we were going to survive in a very competitive investment banking environment. And we were lucky enough to be hired by a large foreign company who asked us to study the educational publishing marketplace. Now this is in the early 1993. And at that particular time, there was an explosion of supplemental educational companies, really spearheaded by teachers who realized that there was a lack of adequate materials in the schools. The textbooks were dated, and so there was an explosion of deals. And we, thanks to this foreign company, ended up rolling up. I hate to use that term because it's sort of it's a negative term, but we ended up acquiring 12 or 13 companies and built them a very large educational publishing business. And that really launched us into this business, and we subsequently very much committed to the industry. And in fact, we did focus groups with the teachers to find out what types of companies were providing the kinds of materials that they really could use. And so we began building an advisory business in the education space, and ended up working with a lot of large companies as well, doing a lot of strategic thinking along with the deal work. I think our firm is not just deal oriented, it's oriented towards helping companies think through their growth options and look at opportunities. The last decade has been incredibly exciting because we've had the opportunity to take our expertise into the EdTech space, which is, as we all know, very exciting, very complicated. And now we're working, after working all those years with these big companies, we're now working with a lot of young companies, even startups. We call it venture development, but it's really becoming a partner with those companies to help them grow their business and look at all the various options. So that's a little bit about Tucker Capital. I did want to say one thing about, as a backdrop to the discussion we're having today. We're going to all be talking about deals and process and how things are structured and when they're initiated. But success in all these transactions, whether it's acquisitions, partnerships, or selling your business, it's not about the deal. If the deal is a good deal, it'll get done. It's not about the deal. It's not about financial modeling. It's not about all the things that you can achieve, all the whiteboard strategies. It's not about negotiating tactics or mechanics. What it is about, and I think that you will probably hear it today, is about the human element. It's about what's at stake for each party, whether it's two companies getting together for an acquisition or a partnership or a sale of all or part of your company. There's a big vision. There's a reason you're doing it, and you have to identify that big idea. And then you have to say, what is at stake for both parties? And when groups do that, and when they balance what's important to each side, and then they collaborate on building out a plan that's not only that's realistic and also addresses the really tough issues that people don't like to talk about in the beginning of deals, you then build this cycle of trust, which allows for a successful transaction. So as you listen to all of the details of how you do this, think about that as an overlay.
Baron?
Yes. So I'm in the similar business as Craig. I'm president of Whitestone Communications. We're a merger and acquisition advisory firm. My background was in publishing. I started here in this building with McGraw-Hill doing corporate development acquisitions. Then went to Simon & Schuster across the street. And from there started Whitestone. We're celebrating 20 years this year. I'm pleased that Dick Casaubon is here as Senior Advisor to Whitestone in the education market, and part of our emphasis on education, we began about 4 years ago when Dick joined us, and as a result, we've made education a major focus of what we've been doing, working on transactions across the spectrum from pre-K to to 12. Both with print and electronic businesses. And we also are the publisher. I hope you got your copy of the Who's Buying Whom report, where we're tracking all the deals done in our field, so we have a really good grasp on who the buyers and sellers are and the valuations that are being paid. We generally are representing smaller companies on the sell side. When I say smaller, that's revenue 3 to 5 million up to 25 to 30 million, selling them to the larger players. It used to be the McGraw-Hills, Harcourts, but maybe the Harcourts are coming back, not so much maybe the McGraw-Hills at the moment, and the Pearsons. And we also do work with buyers doing focused acquisition searches, where we go out into the market, look for candidates for them to help them successfully conclude acquisitions. So that's kind of the quick summary, and go on to the next panelist.
Wens?
Yes, my name is Wens Gerdyman. I'm co-founder and CEO of Arcadia Apps. I spent 15 years in e-commerce software, both on small businesses and enterprise, before becoming an independent consultant. And in the past 2 years, I've been with Arcadia Apps. Arcadia is a producer of educational software, especially apps and courseware. We used to make our own apps for the iPads, and we started by producing an LSAT preparation app, and quickly it became the top-rated and top-selling app for the law school category in the App Store. So much so that Samsung really liked what they saw, and then they started giving us money to make those apps available in the Samsung marketplace for their Galaxy family of devices. But we quickly found out that to create great education courseware, you need not only great technology, but also great content. And that's why we shifted our strategy from creating our own apps under our brand to partnering with the publishers in the education space, so that together we can work to launch great products into the market that help students and increase learning outcomes and all that good stuff.
Good, thank you. And our last panelist is Larry Scheller with Learners High.
Learners High has been in business for quite a while. We got founded in May. And our, we have a revolutionary approach to how people learn. You know, you go to a website where there's content, right? And usually you see a video or read some content or somebody reads to you. And so we're not like that. Then, you know, they ask you some questions and drill you, and then they give you a test to make sure you understood what the content was that was presented. By and large, that's every website. And so we don't do that if you come to learnershigh.com, and we're up and running. There's no foreplay. We just ask you a question right off the bat. You may get it, you may not, but if you get it, you know, it's a happy path you follow, and you get epiphanies throughout as you discover things through the questions that are asked. So we integrate the Montessori and Socratic methods online. And in researching this, we were told, oh, we tried that, and, you know, it's impossible. You'll never make it work. We found a way to make it work. And so basically, we're a container business. We create a nice looking container. It's attractive. You want to pour stuff in it. You know. And so we crowdsource the content. People put the content in, and then it's then available either privately for the people who pour it in or publicly, kind of like Facebook or Twitter. But you know, this is our model. And then so that's a unique aspect of the business. My background is I've been on and off an entrepreneur. I'm also involved with data, so I've done data strategy and management for companies like Bridgewater Associates, Bank of America, other hedge funds and banks. And I'm particularly interested in this kind of panel because about strategy, you know, partnerships and whatnot. Way back when I first got started, my first company was a software company a long time ago. And I asked my brother, I said, hey, you know, what should I call this thing? I have no idea what to call the business. And as a data guy, you know, you figure out pretty quick if you can't name something, you have a problem because like you don't know what it is, there's lack of focus, whatever. But he said, why don't you call it like Pony Express Services? And I said, can I do that? You know, is that legal? And he said, sure. You know, everybody will think you're part of Pony Express, and they started a software wing. And it was like, great. And so that was the first time I realized that partnerships are really great. Of course, I didn't have one. This was a virtual partnership. But everybody thought I was part of Pony Express, and so I had all this great business. And so that was the first indication to me that this is a great idea to form partnerships, even if you don't really form them. So, but since then, I've actually done some non-virtual partnerships and found a great deal of value in them. And you know, that's definitely a driving force behind what we're doing at Learners High.
So should I change our name to JP Morgan?
Junior, JP Morgan Junior. Or how about Jamie Dimon?
So we want to start off the discussion talking about partnerships. So our panel is about equally divided here between the acquisition folks and the partnering guys with Larry and Wens. And so, yeah, Wens had some really good points here, and we'll have some comment after these brief slides here. The first one was, so why partner? Yep.
Okay, so, you know, I'm with a small company, and like I said, we figured out that in the education space to make great courseware or education apps, it's not enough to have technology. You've got to have content and curriculum expertise. So that's why we partner. You know, as a small company focusing on technology, I had zero expertise in education. My expertise was on how to make consumers buy more stuff and how to help small businesses and companies sell more stuff, but not in how to help students learn. And that's why we're all in this business, right? It's the double bottom line. So I have to be humble and acknowledge that I don't have that expertise and go out of my you know, cave and start talking to people who are experts in education. Of course, we partner also to get funding for new products, and once the product has been developed, then you want to get distribution for the product. Along the way, as we provide the services, we try to extract common items in terms of technology that we can pull back and contribute to our platform, so that in the future when we do a similar project, we can use those or reuse those common items again to reduce the cost for all of our clients. So it's an economies of scale, economies of scope benefit. For the large companies, some people inside a large company, I used to work for a large company. I was with eBay, I was with Yahoo, and I started my career with Procter & Gamble. And I learned that there's not enough time in the day, even if you have 45,000 people working in your company, and there's someone working on something exciting in a new space, you cannot be an expert in everything. So if somebody from the outside of the company can help you accelerate the pace of a new product introduction to market, then you should go for it, because it cuts down your costs, it increases your quality, and your customers can get your product in their hands that much faster, and then you can realize the revenue or the profits from that new product introduction. And then lastly, you can reduce your risk in a new space, because that other person who's doing the product you outsource to, they've tested this multiple times before, so that you don't have to try it from scratch. And then I have some slides about different models of partnership that we have in our long life, all these 2 years. As I said, we started by licensing some content from an existing publisher. So this is very straightforward. The LSAT app, we license the content from the Council for Law School Admissions. They're like the college board, I see down here, for the law schools. So they're probably the only ones who license their content at that time to be carried in another person's app. So we did that. And the combination of great content and great technology made it the top-rated app in the law school preparation category for the App Store. So that's one model, very traditional. The next model is something that we did with Kaplan Test Prep. We actually met with Kaplan Test Prep here. So hooray for SIIA, if you're not a member, become a member. We got introduced to Kaplan about the beginning of last year, and then it took a while before they actually responded to our inquiry, and about 8 to 12 months. But when it happened very quickly. They said, we're ready to do a deal, come talk to us. We discussed the scope over the phone, and then when they were ready, after Hurricane Sandy last year, I came over here to kick off the project, and within a couple of months we launched the product, and that was one of the benefits I talked about. Kaplan Test Prep was able to reduce the risk and accelerate the product to market, because we had a tested platform that had been used by hundreds of thousands of students before. So that's one model. We provide technology, they provide content, and then we split the revenue. Third model is useful for applying to grants. For example, Gates Foundation has some grants for education, right? Because they try to do healthcare, education, and something, and they try to save the world, right? So education is one area that they're big in. So another grant source would be government funding, from NIH, NSF. They provide a lot of grants also for education. In that case, we partner with West Ed, which is a nonprofit organization, a research organization very well known in assessment, research and development services. They have content expertise and curriculum design expertise. We have technology. Standalone, I wouldn't have access to the grant sources that they have access to, and by themselves, WestEd also cannot have access to some of the grant funding that we have access to. For example, NIH provides SBIR, which is only for small businesses, but there's a variation of SBIR called STTR, and that is given to small businesses who partner with research organizations. So that's perfect. WestEd is a research organization. We are the small business. We partner together, and we get funding from the NIH. We're in the process of doing so. But we did win the Literacy Courseware Challenge together with WestEd for a beta product that targets the middle schoolers to increase literacy in that area. And then the final model is straight work for hire, like what I mentioned earlier. Samsung liked what we did in the App Store, and they wanted our presence in their marketplace and the Galaxy family of devices. So we do work for hire, meaning that companies like College Board or somebody can white label our technology, and we provide the toolkit and the templates, and then it can be part of your final product. And for all practical purposes, from the end user perspective, we don't exist. But we would like a share of that in the form of license fee or something like that.
Great. So, Larry, you heard Wens take on partnering. When you're thinking about partnering, how do you evaluate potential partnerships?
Well, first, Wens gave great examples of what you can do with partnerships. I just want to synthesize that a little bit in terms of, okay, to answer your initial question, like why partner? And so it basically, partnerships come in so many different flavors, right? There's, but one thing that's common to what makes a great partnership is that one side has a weakness and the other side has a strength, and then so you're putting a peg in a hole, basically, right? So you might think about all the different ways that partnerships can occur. It's always, I think by and large, it's always there's a strength and a weakness. So, for example, on your initial slide, like you had, there was the small company, they're willing to take great risks, while the big company's not. So that means viva la difference, right? There's a chance to get together and make stuff happen, some synergies. So it's always about synergies. And then you might look at competition, like how competitors become partners and do strategic alliances and stuff. And you might think, well, it doesn't make too much sense because they probably have the same strengths and weaknesses. But if you look at it a different way, every company's different. And if you look at it like you're doing the same thing, then you're both competing commodity, you're competing on price, and it's bad for both of you. And if you think of it in a different way, where you look at how you're different, then you can start pulling away from the commodity magnet, and it's not a zero-sum game anymore. So it differentiates you from your competition. So it helps you actually, the discussion benefits both of you, right? Because you're both, and we're all in a way kind of competitive. I'm talking to a bunch of other LMSs or whatever, and so I don't look at them as competition. We're all, it's a rising tide raises all boats kind of thing. So I don't know if that helps.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, and when you can start answering this, be the first one to do this, is how do you know that when you're talking to, you're talking to a company, you're talking to an individual, that the partnership is real?
When they write the check. when they're willing to commit, there's got to be a financial upside to each party. Right? I used to work for big companies too, and when I was working for eBay, I was a group product manager for a partnership product, and we serve ads to websites based on ads that we collect from merchants or advertisers. So it's like Google AdSense, but for products, because eBay is a commerce provider. I always make sure that when I champion an outside vendor in the company, that they get paid, because they're in it for if they don't survive, then we lose something.
Mm-hmm.
So a simple thing is, when they're willing to pay, then it's real, whether in the form of cash or commitment of resources,
mm-hmm.
or commitment of distribution resources. It doesn't have to be cash. It can be in the form of other kinds of resource investment.
Larry?
I think it's a good way to phrase it, commitment of resources, whatever it is. So, and you know, your deal that you talked about with Kaplan, I got a kick out of it. It's like, you know, well, you met somebody and you emailed them for 8 months and you didn't hear anything back, and then one day they call up and in 3 months the deal is done. That's unbelievable. Okay, that's fast, really fast. Even if you had it in 8 months, it's pretty fast. But when you know, in terms of, like we did, I had a company and a startup 15 years ago, and we had the technology and we're in a new area. And big companies like to partner with startups in these new areas so they don't miss out. So we're talking to the American Management Association, and they you know, we built a relationship. And so we knew a deal was coming because there was continuous involvement over time. And first it was they wanted us to speak to their people, and then it was we're going to meet with their sales force, understand their issues and problems. But we knew it was really going to be a deal when they brought the general counsel in. You know, when you meet with the lawyers, they're serious. They're going to spend money on the lawyers. And then it was true. A week after that, the deal was done.
So we got time for 2 more questions on partnerships, and one of them I think is really a good question is, should you partner with a competitor?
Right. Well, so yeah, to try to address that, and it depends on the competitor. So some examples. So I had a guy. I've been 12 years in the education business, selling a Montessori-based low-tech product to homeschoolers. Talk about a niche market, right? Montessori to homeschoolers. Although someone just said, you know, there's 2 million homeschool families growing 10% a year. It's not a bad market. So there's other companies selling math curriculum, and you might say, oh, you know, gosh, that's your competition. And they were encroaching into our area as far as age range. We're encroaching into theirs, but we partnered up with this one company. And at trade shows, we'd have a booth, they'd have a booth, and we send people to each other's booths all the time. And so if they bought theirs, they'd buy ours. If they bought ours, we make sure, you know, we encourage them to buy theirs. And it was a great partnership. That worked out really, really well because there was that age difference, even though we knew we were going to be future competitors. There was another company that we tried to partner with, and we talked to them, and they were in the zero-sum game frame of mind, and we couldn't make it work because they just felt threatened that we were going to, you know, just use everything and be, you know, be bad people and just use it to our advantage. And so it just depends on really understanding their value system. If your values align, that's not a zero-sum game, there's a good chance that, yes, you could do business with a competitor and both pull away from that commodity magnet to both your benefits.
Wens, you want to comment?
Never say never. You know, when you're young and hungry, you have to keep your mind open. And you know, I never close the door. And if there's an opportunity, and like Larry said, if you know, both parties can keep their minds open, then why not? But in general, it's difficult to make it happen.
Can I just interject? I mean, it's a challenge in the acquisitions world. Often people wonder, should I sell to my competitor? And often the competitor can be the ideal buyer, but the question becomes, well, how can I handle that and not have the deal fall apart, not have the competitor come back and eat my lunch? So there's a problem in acquisitions as well.
Which is a good reason to try to partner with a competitor. So when you reach, because that could be a good end game, right? And you don't have to worry.
The last question is, how do you, what's the right way and the wrong way to approach a potential partner?
Okay, maybe in the context of, again, small company, big company, I think startups often make a mistake. You know, since Clayton Christensen wrote this book about the innovator's dilemma, and the term disruption becomes every language, all startups in their zeal, they like to say, we're going to disrupt the industry, we're going to disrupt that and this, and they come across as very cocky when they try to approach the larger companies. And of course, when you approach a larger company who are already established and entrenched in the industry, that way it's going to piss them off and say, go away, right? I don't want to talk to you. So I think if there are any startups in the room or small businesses, you have to be confident, but you don't want to keep saying disrupt this, disrupt that. You know, the VCs might like it, but established players. They don't want to hear that they're going to be chasing out of their own market, right? And for the larger companies, I think, like I said earlier, keep your minds open. You can do a lot more. You can accomplish and get promoted. The two people that I worked with at Kaplan Test Prep, they got promoted 6 months ago, both of them together. And partly it was because they were able to make the launch of our joint product successful. So there are benefits for both sides.
Larry, do you have any comments?
In terms of approaching potential partners, I mean, it depends who the potential partner is. It's a delicate conversation. If you follow the idea that you want to match your weakness with their strength and vice versa, your competitors aren't going to be transparent about their weaknesses. And so it's from that standpoint, it's easier with a big company. With a competitor, you want to transcend competition, so that establishes a common goal. That in any negotiation, if you take any negotiation course, they'll tell you, you want to establish a common agenda. So that's really the first thing to think about. And to Wen's point, big companies know they're going to be disrupted. And so if you use the Socratic method and say, are you worried about being disrupted? Then they'll figure out that they'll get the epiphany that they should really be talking to you. So I think there's ways to approach that in a sensible manner without hiding from it. To find and explore where the safety is.
And just relate another point
Sure.
from acquisitions to partnerships. Wen made a great point, because when we think, when you have a company for sale and you're trying to think, well, who's going to be the buyer, and you think, okay, this company, you're thinking this company has a brain and it's thinking about what is the strategic acquisition for them. But the company has no, it's not a human thing. The human thing is the person who's going to run the business and have the division report to them and make them look good so they get the promotion. So it's a large part of the acquisitions game is finding the person and the supporter in the company who wants to look good. And it's not something they teach in business school.
So let's move to acquisitions. So we have Craig and Baron here who have been contemplating a series of questions that I'm going to ask. So we'll start with Craig here. What kind of criteria are important to consider when thinking about acquisitions, especially in the current market conditions?
Well, I think it starts with, acquisition criteria. The underpinning of the criteria to begin with are what are you trying to accomplish, and is acquisitions the right way to do it? So, when we're talking to clients, we often say, why do you want to make an acquisition? And it's got to be more than just, I want another $100 million in revenues or another 5. It usually has to do with a strategic need. But then you need to look at whether or not they can achieve that through a partnership, they can achieve that through organic growth, or maybe an outside investment that helps them grow. So once you agree that acquisitions makes the most sense and you know why, then you can develop a series of acquisition criteria and to actually name which ones are the ones that are right for you. It's really deal specific. So, for example, the typical acquisition criteria we'll see, I want sales of a certain number. I want profits and margins at a certain level. I want a growth rate that's usually 10% or better. But it depends. Again, it's very industry specific. It lays out the product category that you want to be in. Do you want to be in an extension of your existing product, or do you want to move into a new market with a new product? It also reflects the culture of your business. Your criteria should be realistic in the sense that you may not have a management structure or an infrastructure structure that will accommodate the ideal acquisition. So you always want to be looking at your acquisition criteria in a very realistic way. And keep in mind that these criteria are very dynamic because you're going to get in the market. And what we do is we'll sort of rank the criteria in terms of importance. So maybe 1 is the least important and 5 is the most of the group you pick. So then when you get your companies and you start to weigh them against those criteria, you can score them. And it's a great way to check your thinking, because oftentimes we found the company out there that you think is the one you want doesn't match up as well with your criteria. And that forces you, this is the whole idea behind the criteria, it's a screen. It forces you to either say, well, I was wrong about my criteria, or, this, I've got to change in some fashion because this company really is a good strategic fit. So criteria really cover everything from products to management to culture and to market conditions. Do you want to move into a market sector that is dominated by large private equity guys or a large strategic players? So it's, and you're going to be, as you go through the acquisition process and talk to companies, you're going to find that you're going to change your criteria constantly and refine them.
So, Darren, do you have any comments on that?
Well, I think, we work with buyers on a regular basis, helping them go through the process, and it sounds, you covered the most common points, and it is a dynamic thing. It's always changing, and the challenge is really also, of course, find the seller that's ready to actually move forward and at a reasonable price. So those are, I think, one of the larger challenges.
So that's a good point. So when you have clients that you're talking to, when should a company consider selling?
At the top. That's always the, if we only knew when that was. But I think if you're on a growth pattern, if you can have 2 or 3 years of, as Craig was saying, 10% plus growth, if you can have 10 to 15% profit margin, if you can have a repeat customer base. I thought I'd turn this off. Sorry. It's too high tech for me. So if you have these components in place and the overall acquisition market is a good one, which it has been for about the last 2 or 3 years, hopefully for another at least 2 or 3 more. If those things are in alignment and it's time for you from a lifestyle standpoint and from your life decision standpoint to consider a sale, then that's when you should move forward. I think there are people that do try to wait to hit that absolute top, and I think that's a mistake, because you can, I think Warren Buffett would agree, we can never time the market, we can never know when the exact moment is, but if it's the right moment in your life and you got the company to a nice level, you think maybe now is the time to bring in some fresh blood, then that's the time.
Craig, any comment?
I would just agree 100%. I think it's market conditions, it's upward trajectory. You want to sell when you're on the upswing and not try to pick the top, because every year a lot of clients will say, well, next year we've got all these new initiatives, and next year the market conditions could be very different, or they might not realize those initiatives. Lifestyle, of course, is one, and also I think it's important for smaller entrepreneurs to sell when they've institutionalized their management team. Unless they're a company that's just a quick fold-in for somebody, you have a lot more potential buyers if you have a management group that can carry on the business after you've gone.
So, Craig, when you're talking to a management team or talking to an individual owner about an acquisition or selling, what kind of things do you emphasize about management, infrastructure, should a company consider that's either buying or selling?
Well, I'll just take, I'll take selling in this particular case. An example would be a company that we worked with years ago, and the owner of the company was he was a technical genius, but he also was a control freak, and he literally was in every decision-making process in the business. It was really quite astonishing. It was a very profitable business, but he made every decision, and his management team were pretty much terrified by his decision-making, and so one of the first things he said he wanted to sell the business, and we came in and said, you can't sell a business because you're involved in everything. You have key disciplines that aren't in place. You needed somebody in marketing and somebody in another sector in the technology side, and he also had a very patched together infrastructure without the proper systems to really grow his business. It was fine for where he was at that moment, but if a buyer came in, the first thing the buyer does is look at the scalability, and that's what drives multiple. Growth is multiple. So if they see that the infrastructure is in place, the management team isn't in place to drive it to a higher sales and profit level, then it's going to be a disappointing sale process. So we gave him that bitter pill. 4 years later, he came back and he'd done it all. So it's a very important part of the process that goes back to the institutionalizing the management issue again. I mean, you can certainly sell your business without doing all these things, but you won't achieve top valuation.
I think Greg would agree. There is one exception, which if you're a fold in other words, if you have a product line and they're just going to take over the product and they're not really interested in having a team of people, in those cases you can't make a sale without having.
So Baron, what would be your, not David Letterman here, but what are your top list of things an owner should do if they're going to sell in the next 2 years?
I just happen to have a list. It's funny. I have on my website a little webinar I did on selling, and it's not in the business school books, but the first thing to do is take a walk on the beach, because you really need to decide if you're really committed to doing this, because it's an arduous process. It's 2 jobs at least at once, selling your business. It's emotional. Most entrepreneurs have an emotional attachment to the business. This is another member of the family, so it requires a commitment to the process and an understanding that you're going to be letting go of an important part of your life. So that's the first thing I would do, and talk with your family and have everybody on board for the ride. But beyond that kind of personal aspect, I mean, one of the more obvious things is that we talked about is having a growth record of revenue and profits. And what you could do there is take a look at your business. If you've been in business a long time, you may have people that you really just kept on because they've just been there a long time. It's a hard decision, but you want to make the business as profitable as possible. You can reward these people for their long-term commitment as a financial reward from the transaction, but you really want to look at what's been working in your business. If you've been spending money on marketing, but it really hasn't been contributing, but you've just been doing it out of habit, so you want to take a look at that. So really you want to be like looking at the business as a consultant to yourself, streamlining as much as possible. Having the financials in order is the second major thing. A lot of entrepreneurs are just looking at what they take home. I'm representing a company right now. It's in that circumstance, the guy takes home $1 million a year, and he has no idea what the financials of the business look like. All he knows is what's in his bank account. So you want to move beyond that to a more sophisticated P&L. You want to have the financials gap-based. You want to have them prepared in a consistent manner going back at least, say, 4 years, so that the buyer can see how the business has been performing. And the reason this is important is because the buyers are all operating on GAAP, and they're going to look at your business on a GAAP basis, not just the cash basis. People often ask if audited statements are required. They're not required, but you want to have your financials, as I said, GAAP-based and consistent. And they also have to match the tax returns. You don't want to be showing one thing to a buyer, and then he says, they always want to see your tax returns, so they always want to have those match up. That would be very convenient. Another thing that small companies tend to lack is systems to track customers and product sales. I was working with a company that had $20 million in revenue, and they could barely track sales by customer. it was strange that they got to that level without that system. But the problem was they had one system that was like tracking sales or something like that, and one system that was handling the order fulfillment. The system did not talk. So that was a major issue, required a lot of spreadsheet work during the process to try to connect the dots. So the extent that you can have systems in place that track your data so you can present data readily to buyers would be very helpful. We talked, Greg's already talked about having the infrastructure. That would be important, particularly when, as we said, you get over a certain size. I would say over $5 million in revenue. And then lastly, the most important thing is always run your business as if the business will not be sold, because that does happen. You can have a recession, you have a 9/11, different things happen. So you always have to continue to run the business as if it's going to be sold. So if you're thinking about making improvements that are going to be good for the long term, you'll want to continue to do that because you may still own the business several years out.
Greg, any?
Well, I think Barron's hit them all. I would emphasize the last one. I think continuing to invest in your business throughout the process, assuming it's not going to happen. I think one of the things is very important. I think most buyers will carefully evaluate whether entrepreneurs have squeezed profits up by cutting back where they could on either expenses or capital improvements, and I think that really comes back to bite you. I think since many transactions, a large percentage of them don't close, you do want to run the business as if it's not going to close and keep investing in it.
So we're at our ending time here. And so before we end, though, I want to go down the row here and ask each of you to give me your one brief word of advice based on partnerships, acquisition, selling, partnerships, and acquisitions or selling.
Start here.
Start with you,
Be
man.
prepared. Boy Scout motto.
Be prepared, that's good. I would say be aware of your style. Somebody mentioned MBTI earlier, and it's really helpful if you know where you are in terms of you're a top-down thinker or a bottom-up thinker, and look at things the other way. And I think you'll experience epiphanies if you do that. And that will, in turn, provide more open-mindedness and let you see more opportunities for synergies with other companies.
I would say objectively evaluate all your options carefully. There's not just one option to grow your business.
Going to be a little different. I was reading about Nelson Mandela's death last week, and one of the things that President Obama reflected on his life was that he made decisions not out of fear, but out of hope for the better future. So, in considering partnerships, whether you're on a small business or on the big enterprises side, if you make decisions out of a better outcome instead of being driven by risk averseness, I think you will make better decisions on average in the long term.
That's a great one.
Yeah. Run towards something, not away from something.
That's really
Right. So I'll ask you to give these guys a round of applause. And certainly if you have any questions, they'll be here for the next few minutes and then hopefully at the reception. Thank you.
Very good job.
One of my colleagues here.
What is your group doing?